Thanks so much, John, and good afternoon, Mtw agencies. I hope everybody is doing well this afternoon, I guess morning still, for those of you on the West Coast and beyond. Welcome to the next webinar in this series of onboarding webinars for the Landlord Incentives Cohort. Today, we are going to really dig into the Mtw Supplement to the PHA plan. So we'll be talking about what is the Mtw Supplement to the PHA plan? Why do you need to complete it? What do you need to do? Mtw Waivers. What are Mtw Waivers, the different types of waivers, and we'll talk about some specific requirements around the waivers and their associated activities, particularly as it relates to the Landlord Incentives Cohort. We will talk about, Allison will be talking about key things to know regarding conducting an impact analysis and a review of the hardship policy requirements. And then we'll also be, Chris will be talking about the public engagement process, recognizing, we know that you've already been talking with your, engaging with your public, with your residents, with your staff, and we'll talk about this a little bit in more detail about some ideas and tips and tricks of the trade. As you probably noticed, the supplement training is a two-part training. Today, part one, we're mostly talking about the what. What is the supplement? What do you need to do? What are the responsibilities? What are the tips and tricks? And next meeting on the May 4th, we will be talking about the how. How do you complete a supplement? How do you upload it into the system and all of those pieces? So today we're focusing on the what. Next time we'll be focusing on the how. As always, we will leave time at the end of today's session for questions and answers and throughout the session as well. As John noticed, as we are going through the slides, if you have any specific questions, please add them into the chat and click everyone so that we all see them. We'll try to answer them as we go, and during the questions breaks, you'll be able to come off mute to do that as well. We've got some great presenters today. We have Crystal Mills, Housing Innovation Specialist in the Mtw office, Allison Christensen, the Senior Housing Innovation Specialist in the Mtw office, and Jennifer Rainwater, the Housing Innovation Specialist in the Mtw office as well. And with that, Crystal, I am going to turn it over to you to get the conversation started on waivers. Crystal, over to you.
All right, thanks, Marianne, and thanks to everyone for joining us here today. I'm Crystal Mills, and I'm excited to speak with you all about HUD Form 50075 Mtw, otherwise known as the Mtw Supplement. So, what is the Mtw Supplement? The Mtw Supplement is a web-based form that captures the reporting requirements for Mtw Expansion agencies by collecting information about what activities Mtw Expansion agencies propose to undertake and the waivers that you request to be able to implement them. It will include information about how residents will be protected if the Mtw activities create any hardships, and it will also provide information about the Mtw agency's assessment of the impact of the activities, which don't worry, we'll dive more into that later. Mtw Expansion agencies will also use the Mtw Supplement to communicate your plans with residents and community stakeholders through the required public comment processes. We will talk about that later as well, and in our next webinar, because it's such a crucial piece of the process. And that is something we just can't really overstate, the importance of community engagement. This engagement and communication process is a key aspect of effective change management, which I know you guys have heard a bit about. It is how you will build buy-in and identify issues that may need to be addressed early on. And this is why Mtw has specific additional requirements for the public engagement process to ensure your community is really getting engaged and is ready for the upcoming changes. Now, once you create the Mtw Supplement, you will be able to use the document to communicate clearly with all of your stakeholders about what you are planning and why. What results do you expect? And how residents will be protected if the activities have any adverse effects. And over time, we at HUD will utilize the information collected to monitor and evaluate the Mtw demonstration program. with the overarching goal to identify activities that will work well and that can eventually, if prudent, eventually be incorporated into future updates to the way HUD's programs are operated. All Mtw expansion agencies, including agencies who are even designated as qualified agencies, are exempt from the requirement to submit are exempt from the requirements to submit I'm sorry, my computer's froze. Okay, I'm back. I apologize for that. So all Mtw expansion agencies, including agencies that are designated as qualified agencies, are required to submit your Mtw supplement every year. And you should strive to do so to submit no later than 75 days prior to your agency's fiscal year beginning. I want to point out for our qualified agencies on the call, you are not required for the Mtw Operations Notice to submit your PHA plan annually. You may continue to submit your plan every 5 years. However, whether you are a qualified agency or a non-qualified agency, your agency's Mtw supplement must go through and be submitted every year to HUD. And thus, since the Mtw supplement is a supplement to the PHA plan, it also want to point out it doesn't take the place of the PHA plan submission, and it should be submitted as an attachment to your PHA plan. So the two are now married happily. And when you see one, you see the other. I kid. But they must be submitted into HUD at the same time of the your PHA's plan annual submission. And here's a good point to jot down here, that depending on the timing in which your agency wants to submit any changes, you're also permitted to submit the Mtw supplement as an amendment to a previously approved PHA plan. So currently, the Mtw supplement is submitted online, and until further directed, your PHA plan should continue to be submitted in whatever agreed upon manner of submission that you have established with your HUD field office. That's a question that we've constantly gotten, because they are submitted in two different ways, but have to be submitted at the same time. So continue to order submission is PHA plan first, Mtw supplement, same time. Therefore, you will not be able to submit a new or amended Mtw supplement without amending the annual plan. You will want to work with your assigned field offices, as they are the ones that will have oversight over your program. They are the ones that are going to be your primary point of contact. And remember that both the PHA plan and the Mtw supplement must be submitted at the same time. They must go through the public process requirements that are listed out in the Mtw Operations Notice. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the Mtw supplement is completed, is submitted by completing an online form, and the online system will guide you through the 10 sections that you see here listed on the screen. Any online form can be a little intimidating, but luckily this form is designed to be helpful and guide you through the process. It uses a smart logic to take you to the screens you need to complete based on the information that you input. So what that means is it will have a skip screen. You don't need to complete. If you don't need to complete something, then it will allow you to move forward. It includes drop-down menus to help you select the correct options, and it helps you to ensure that you have thought through and address all of the required safe harbors, which we'll also talk about here in a few minutes. And it also gives you places to upload your supporting documentation, like hardship policies or impact analysis. Which is more to come on that. Next slide, please. Now, that's better. Understanding what the Mtw supplement is and what it will require is really rooted in your agency's understanding of the Mtw Operations Notice. The Mtw Operations Notice spells out the terms and conditions that an Mtw expansion agency must adhere to. It is what governs the participation of all Mtw expansion agencies and establishes the requirements for the implementation of the Mtw program, all in which is pursuant to the 2016 Mtw Expansion Statute. So some critical steps to undertake before you complete the Mtw supplement will be to decide which specific waivers and associated activities will help your agency to meet your needs, and to properly identify that what will involve having a public process where you include your staff, your residents, and your local community stakeholders. The waivers and associated activities that you identify as possibilities, to help meet your agency's goal may also require you to develop an impact analysis or a hardship policy, which can take much thought and time to thoroughly dive into. So please remember that you do not need to master everything about the Mtw supplement right now. For the moment, you need a sense of what the Mtw supplement requires and what steps you need to take to be ready to submit in accordance to the Mtw Operations Notice requirements. Later, when you are ready to submit, you can figure out all of the submission and mechanical details. In fact, to help you when you are ready to submit, Wendell and Hubenick from our office will be creating a special video that walks you through the mechanics of completing this form. The video will be posted to the Mtw Supplement webpage, and you should watch the video as you get ready to begin to complete your online form. So you have the tips and the tricks fresh in mind when you get closer to time as you begin entering the information. The link that we've included on this slide will house the walkthrough video, and also currently includes some incredibly helpful resources related to the Mtw supplement, including a PDF version of the Mtw supplement. I want to emphasize, because we've had many supplements now to be submitted and from Mtw agencies that have newly been designated and have successfully onboarded. It's a great and best practice to utilize the PDF version of the Mtw supplement form. It's a great resource for you because it provides you with a hard copy of the online form, and using the PDF form will help you to structure putting together your ideas. And it also includes some helpful instructions that provide a brief description of every section of the form. The instructions are located at the end, so keep scrolling. They're in there and they are very helpful. I believe that everyone has been provided a copy of the PowerPoint. So when time permits, again, please click the link, save, and familiarize yourself with the PDF, the video, walkthrough video once it becomes available, and many other helpful resources on the Mtw Supplement webpage. Next slide, please. Thank you, John. So now let's first remind ourselves what the 4 types of waivers are. All right, I'm going to walk through them now. Keep in mind that if you need a recap, you can see more about the 4 types of waivers in Section 4 of the Mtw Operations Notice. You may also reference the Mtw Online Manual on HUD Exchange, where there's a whole section explaining the types of waivers and their requirements. Gives you a lot of concepts too about how to think through things. But Mtw waivers. So HUD has included 17 Mtw waivers permitting a range of activities. These included Mtw waivers and their associated activities are provided in Appendix 1 of the Mtw Operations Notice. Now, although the Mtw waivers are included in the Mtw Operations Notice, you still need to have the approval letter from the field office, official approval letter from HUD, that states that your agency has been approved to implement all the requirements and details as spelled out in the Mtw supplement. And that has to be done before your agency can implement any activity. You have to have official approval in writing from HUD. We also have our safe harbor waivers. Now, many Mtw waivers have safe harbors. Safe harbors are additional requirements that specify the range of flexibility available to the Mtw agency when implementing activities associated with an Mtw waiver. They specify the requirements that the Mtw agencies must follow when the Mtw waiver is implemented. These include things like exempting elderly and disabled households from some requirements, or conducting an impact analysis to determine the effects of the Mtw waiver. When an Mtw waiver has safe harbors, the Mtw agency, you all, must follow them in order to implement the activities without any additional HUD approval. But sometimes an established safe harbor may not fit within the Mtw agency's local needs or priorities. So what happens if it doesn't? If you find that you need more? If a safe harbor does not align with local priorities or market conditions, then your Mtw expansion agency may be able to still request permission. Well, you still can request, but you may be permitted to expand on that activity, doing things outside of what is listed within the safe harbor parameters. When that happens, this is called and referred to as a safe harbor waiver. A safe harbor waiver is not allowed, though, for any safe harbors marked with an asterisk. And I'll actually show you an example of that here shortly. Next is our cohort-specific waiver. As part of the Mtw expansion, HUD is studying specific policy changes. In this cohort, HUD will be evaluating landlord incentives, as you may have heard. And you've also heard that HUD has added cohort-specific waivers to the landlord incentives cohort. These cohort-specific waivers and associated Mtw activities may only be used to the extent permitted within the applicable selection notice. In addition, the landlord selection notice, landlord incentive selection notice, identifies certain Mtw waivers that agencies cannot implement during the study period. So as you are planning for the activities that you want your agency to implement, be mindful to always reference your selection notice to stay in alignment with the policy and evaluation requirements that your PHA is required to implement, if any. So my amazing colleague, Allison, will go into more detail on both the landlord incentives, cohort-specific waivers, and any applicable restrictions on certain Mtw waivers a bit later in the webinar. Next, we have our agency-specific waiver. So, you know, Mtw agencies have used the flexibilities offered under Mtw to think broadly about the problems their communities face and how doing things differently could help solve those problems. Mtw is solution-oriented, and so that's what we're all about. And agency-specific waivers are the key to allowing Mtw expansion agencies to go beyond the Mtw waivers and propose new and innovative activities that may help to meet some of your specific local needs. It's important to remember that when assessing and ultimately proposing any possible solutions for your needs, that an Mtw agency specific waiver can only be used to waive the 1937 Act and implementing regulations, which again, have to first be proposed by your agency and again, have to be first approved in writing by HUD. Over time, HUD expects some of these new innovations to be adopted and tested by other Mtw agencies and to eventually become the new best practices for all PHAs nationwide. We're excited about this and can't wait to see, what you all are going to do, what you're going to build, and the impact that it will have on the future of HUD nationwide. Next slide, please. Now, focus first on the pre-vetted waivers, also known as the Mtw waivers. You can find all Mtw waivers in Appendix 1 of the Mtw Operations Notice. You can also reference the online manual. I want to show you here what we have is the waiver name and description, which details the authorization provided to the Mtw agency, subject to the terms of the Mtw Operations Notice. Formatted next is the statuses and regulations waived to allow the Mtw agency to implement the associated activities. We also have the list of waivers and list of permissible activities are organized by program type, i.e. the activity is being proposed for implementation under public housing, PH, and or housing choice voucher, HCV, and then finally safe harbors. Again, these are the additional requirements beyond those specified in the Mtw activity description that the agency must follow in order to implement the activity without additional HUD approval. Next slide, please. So here's the example of how those Mtw waiver descriptions appear in the Appendix 1 of the Mtw Operations Notice. In this case, as this example, we're going to use a waiver of the minimum rent rules and allowing the PHA to establish a minimum rent higher than what is currently allowed for non-Mtw expansion agencies, but not to exceed $130 per month. So let's walk through this format together. You see the waiver name listed first, then the description of the Mtw activity that is permitted, that is followed by the specific status and regulation that are waived. Then in the last section, it lists 4 items as required safe harbors. Not all Mtw waivers have associated safe harbors, but if they do, you need to pay close attention and make sure that there's no asterisks that are listed beside the requirement. So if you see here, we have circled these last 2 here for a reason. They have an asterisk beside them. And what this means is that the requirement cannot be waived. We'll mention this a few more times today and also on May 4th. But if you see an asterisk, remember that requirement cannot be waived, even through a safe harbor waiver or agency-specific waiver request. All right, so as safe harbor waiver requests would be submitted as part of your Mtw supplement, which we will talk more about next webinar. And for now, I think the key thing to remember is to watch out for those asterisks so you know which safe harbor requirements can and cannot be waived. And next slide, please. All right, so to recap, Mtw agencies may implement activities associated with any Mtw waiver contained in Appendix 1 of the Mtw Operations Notice without a prior HUD approval once they ensure that 3 things are in place. First, the activity must be included in the Mtw supplement of a PHA plan, and the Mtw supplement must be approved by the HUD field office. Second, the Mtw agency must update your ACOP and or admin plan as applicable to be consistent with Mtw activities and related waivers. And finally, the Mtw agency must ensure that the activities will be implemented within those associated safe harbors that we just went over, for example, and unless you request and receive approval for a safe harbor waiver, then it must remain in those requirements. So for safe harbors, Mtw agencies are responsible for ensuring that the safe harbors listed in the operations notice are followed unless a waiver is granted. The agency would submit a safe harbor waiver request through their supplement. And of course, as I've stated, safe harbor waivers are never permitted for safe harbors that have an asterisk. This is a pretty good recap. Still more to come, still more to learn. That said, though, if we could advance to the next slide, and I will pass it over to Allison to share with you all more specifics surrounding this specific landlord incentive cohort. All yours, Allison.
Thank you, Crystal. So this slide, we're going to go over some of the requirements that are specific to your cohort, the landlord incentives cohort. And some of these will likely look familiar from the selection notice that I know you all spent so much time looking over. So as we mentioned, as Crystal mentioned before, there are cohort specific requirements that you need to pay attention to when you're selecting your waivers and activities that you're going to include in your Mtw supplement. So the first category we have here are 3 Mtw waivers and associated activities that those PHAs in this cohort are not permitted to undertake during the term of evaluation. So that's 4 years from the evaluation implementation date. So these are restricted during those time period. And as you can see on the slide, those are some of the more intense tenant rent policies, a housing quality standards activity related to penalties for landlords, and term limited assistance. In talking with the evaluators and our colleagues in the Office of Policy Development and Research, they felt those were had a chance to interact badly with the evaluation. So for those reasons, during the term of the evaluations, those will be restricted. So as you design your MTW program and start preparing your supplement, be sure to refer to the selection notice to make sure that you're not including one of these in your MTW supplement. So the last category you see here is any agency-specific or safe harbor waiver that might undermine the evaluation. Now, as Crystal mentioned before, your agency-specific and safe harbor waivers are really broad and really flexible, so it's not possible for us to see exactly how those might interact with the evaluation. So we're going to take those on a case-by-case basis. But for the most part, if they don't interact with the evaluation, they'll be free to move forward. And if there is a possible negative impact, we'll talk to you about that and see if there's a way to reformat the activity or to make it work. But it's possible that it might not. So you have that additional category there. So that's the first block that we have at the beginning of the slide. Now, on the flip side, you can see the second category are those landlord incentives cohort MTW activities list, of which 2 of these you must propose as a part of your MTW supplement. So these were the ones that you talked about in your MTW plan and application package. You'll see them on the screen here. I won't go through them all, but you can read them. So you'll need at least 2 of those. And the first 7 are all standard MTW waivers and associated activities that are in the Mtw Operations Notice. So those are some that any Mtw Expansion PHA can undergo. The last 2 are specific to this cohort. So these are 2 waivers and associated activities that only agencies in this cohort have access to. So those are your special waivers for this cohort. So this is a total of 9 activities that you have to choose from. And as a part of the evaluation for the landlord incentives cohort, you'll need to propose 2 of those in your MTW supplement. So as you develop your MTW supplement, just keep in mind both the restrictions and of waivers and activities that you can approve or you can't propose and those that you must propose. So this slide will always be handy to you as a quick reference as you're putting together your supplement, and we'll be there to guide you along the way also. So with that, I will turn it over to Marianne. I believe we have a question and answer period scheduled.
Fantastic. Thanks, Allison and Crystal. That was a lot of information. So turning it back over to you all, just kind of pause here for a couple minutes to see if there are any questions for Crystal or Allison on anything that they've covered. You can enter your question into the chat box, or you can come off mute and ask your questions verbally.
Marianne, this is Shante. Can you hear me?
Hey, Shante. Yep, sure. Go ahead.
So we are in the process now of submitting our PHA plan, and it has to be submitted by the end of June. So of course we right in the middle of the process right now. It is likely that we will not submit our supplement until June, July. So as you can tell, the timing is off. What does that mean we would need to do? Because the PHA plan has a set deadline and we're not going to be able to align both based on the timing.
So, Crystal, do you want to take that or do you want me to?
We can't hear you, Crystal.
I'm sorry. I'm trying a new microphone. Okay. So that's a very good question, and it is something that has come up repeatedly. So just to emphasize, please stay the course. If you're supposed to submit your PHA plan, continue to do so. Once you're officially designated and your ACC is officially, completely, fully executed, you're officially designated as the MTW agency, and you are at a point in which you're permitted to submit your MTW supplement, you may do so. And you may do so as an amendment to a previously approved, the most recently previously approved PHA plan. So it's okay, continue the course, and you still will be able to submit when ready after you've gone through, the public process specific to the supplement.
So Crystal, we're already official. We've already submitted our ACC. So will we make an amendment to our last approved PHA plan, not the one that we're currently submitting. So our fiscal year 2021 plan, because it's already approved. The other one would be the new plan that has not been approved or submitted or anything.
Okay, and what date did you say that the submission in June?
So it's due June 30th.
Okay, so my thought process is, and we'll get more into this later, but because the Mtw supplement, and more specifically because of the requirements for the Mtw Operations Notice, you will want to reference the public process requirements and timelines to make sure that whatever you're submitting, because that will be separate from what was in the application process, but whatever you're submitting will be included and have to go through that process. And that, if that will meet the same timeline, then you will be able to include it this year.
Yeah.
Let me know if that provides clarity. Mary Ann.
And then maybe if I could say it a little bit differently is once you've gone through the Mtw public process and you're ready to submit, and it sounds like you're being thoughtful and you don't want to rush the submission of the Mtw supplement, you want to take the time to appropriately go through that public process. Once you're ready to submit it, you would be amending your whichever approved Mtw plan, PHA plan. So whatever your most recently approved PHA plan, that's what you would be amending.
Okay, that helps, because it basically, based on what you're saying, we would be amending the one that was approved last year.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep. And I see I have a question on that we are not able to answer, but we can't answer, but maybe others on the line might be able to, or you can talk to the initial agencies. There's a question relating on PHA operating systems. It would be helpful to know what systems other cohort members are using so we can help one another measure the outcomes of Mtw initiatives and the operating system itself. If possible, we are using Yardi. I'm going to put a pin on this one and maybe come back to it at the end if we have time. But again, we can't recommend one system over another, but you can share with each other what your systems are. So I would say maybe if the other PHAs want to enter into the chat what systems you all are using, you can do that, but we at HUD cannot recommend one system over another. But you can share that information across yourselves as much as you want. Any other questions for Crystal or Allison?
Hi, Mary Ann. Yeah, this is Laura from Rockford. I have a question for Crystal, if I can, to kind of expand.
Great. Hey, Laura. Yep. I'm
good. To kind of expand on the annual plan. Right now, we are actually working on our 5-year strategic plan that is due in June. And I've asked several folks, and I haven't been able to get the answer because, of course, you know, with our 5-year plan also comes our 5-year capital plan. So knowing that we're not planning on implementing moving to work designation until October 1, would we put our supplement as an attachment to that strategic plan? Or do we just submit the strategic plan? Our field office usually does not approve it within 90 days or so, which is when we plan to implement moving to work designation. So do we still submit completely separately, or do we attach the supplement to our strategic plan, but then again submit it separately when we're ready? So that they get outlined.
So the supplement, I'm sorry.
I just want to make sure that, because I think we need to identify what we're planning on doing with those fungibilities within our strategic plan. But then I understand too that they would have to see that moving to work supplement to show the justification for that. But then we submit it separately when we're ready to implement.
So the Mtw supplement is a Mtw supplement to the PHA plan. Right, and that's, as I understand, a different document than the strategic plan, am I right?
Correct.
So there's no requirement to attach the Mtw supplement to the strategic plan. It's attached to the PHA plan. I think in the strategic plan, you could reference your MTW status. You could talk about the ideas that you're considering implementing, that kind of a thing. But the MTW supplement, as Crystal said, travels with the PHA plan, not with the strategic plan.
Okay, so when we would then submit that, we would, again, like Shante did, go back and reference our last PHA plan that was approved and do an amendment to
Right,
that.
because you're still submitting your PHA plan annually, right?
Right.
And so the MTW supplement is attached to that PHA plan. You can reference MTW status, you can reference the ideas that you're considering and all of that, which you'll be implementing through the supplement to the PHA plan. You can reference all of that in your strategic plan, but the supplement travels with the PHA plan, not the strategic plan.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Does that answer your question? Yep.
Yep, thank you.
Yep.
And
Great.
Mary Ann, I just wanted to note one more thing kind of about the supplement and PHA plan timing. It's good to think about, you know, you don't want to have too many open documents at one time. So as Shante was referencing, you have that PHA plan that's coming up in June. You know, it's due then. You know, you might think that it's not really worth it to submit your, you know, an amended PHA plan and an MTW supplement, you know, a month in advance of that. So kind of think strategically about when your documents are due and are you really ready at that date? Maybe it's worth waiting a month to submit the two together rather than having, you know, an amended version of a document open and a regular submission. I think that's really good to think about because it can get confusing when you have too many documents that are under review at HUD. So if you have any questions, I think it's good to kind of game it out with your field office representative about what might be some good submission timing. So it'll depend on your specific situation, but you do just want to consider that, I think.
Mm-hmm. So Allison, can I ask you that same question in another way? So for Shantae's example, where she's submitting her PHA plan in June, so that means it'll be approved in September, right?
So yeah, my point is, yeah, if you're submitting something in June, then you probably don't want to submit, if you're submitting your 22 plan in June, you don't want to submit an amended 21 plan and your MTW supplement in May, right? You want to wait until June to make the submission or wait until that June document is approved and then amend it. You don't want to submit another version while you have one document that's, you know, in the hopper for approval. So I may have just confused things, but the moral of the story is talk with your field office about your submission dates in your specific fiscal year time periods, because, you know, you want to work with them to make sure that they're approving things in the most expeditious way. And sometimes having a bunch of amended and regular documents under review can get confusing for folks. That would just be my recommendation.
And I'll say we will be sending out an insider before the next webinar. So Jenny, I'm tapping you here. We can maybe address this more fully, the timing of submissions. And I think, Shante, we might use your specific example, if you don't mind, of PHA, you know, you have an approved 21 PHA plan. You're not submitting your 22 PHA plan until the end of June, but it's not going to be approved until, what, September, October 1, if I have my dates right. And so the question is, you're not ready to submit your MTW supplement in June. When you submit your MTW supplement in July or August, is it an amendment to the 21 plan or the 22 plan? So let us like sketch this out and provide a answer to all of you at the same time. Does that make sense? Thumbs up, Shante?
That's fine. And feel free to call me if you need to. It's just that we were
Always,
already working on it before, as we were being selected, so we couldn't stop
Perfect.
that process.
And you don't want to stop the process of submitting the PHA plan because you are on a deadline, right? You have to submit that on a certain date. So you need to continue to move forward with submitting your PHA plan on the date that it is due. Mm-hmm. You also don't want to rush the creation of the MTW supplement. You want to take the time and the public process that you need to submit that initial supplement. And so if the supplement is going to be submitted a month or two after the PHA plan, that is okay, that's good. That means you're being thoughtful in your MTW piece. The question is, which PHA plan, which supplement is it? Is it a supplement to the 21 that's been approved, or can you meld it with the 22?
Okay.
And we'll try to sketch that out so it's super clear for everybody, but bottom line, stick to the deadline of your PHA plan submissions, period. All right, if it's due 75 days before your fiscal year, for this first one, continue submitting it 75 days before your fiscal year. A. B, don't rush the creation of the supplement. And if for this initial PHA plan years, it's going to be a little bit messy because we're designated and you're doing all this right at about the same time, it might be a little messy this initial year. That's okay. Don't rush the timing of the supplement. Do the process. And then we'll work with you. We, broadly HUD. Thank you for that very important, complicated question. And Allison, with that, I'm going to send it back over to you to start talking about impact analysis and hardship policies, please. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Marianne. So impact analysis. To start off, we'll talk about what is an impact analysis and why would you want to do one. So an impact analysis is a chance to think systematically about the benefits that you expect to see from a certain activity. And in addition, the potential consequences or hardships that the activity might bring as well. So we all know MTW is a demonstration program. So that means we're testing new ideas, new strategies to help our communities. Now, as agencies get ready to start these new activities, it's really important to think through the activities that you're proposing systematically, because you could be covering new territory that hasn't been covered before, and you want to know ahead of time, think that through how that might affect your community and not be caught off guard by any potential interactions. So we have on the slide here some key things to know about an impact analysis. So first of all, I just want to note that they're not required annually for every activity, but they are required annually for some activities. Now we'll discuss more about the specifics on this and what you need to submit when on a later slide, but just know that there are different kinds of activities and different intervals at which you'll need to submit impact analyses. Now, when an impact analysis is required, your agency decides how to approach it. So we really hope that your agency will think this through carefully and take ownership of the process. HUD does not specify every element of the impact analysis. We give you the framework and things that you need to consider, but it's up to the agency to decide how to look at those specific factors. We'll give you some examples of those. Another important point is that a single impact analysis can be done in a way that encompasses multiple activities related to a comprehensive initiative. So a lot of times maybe you'll have a rent policy that brings in different waivers and associated activities from different categories in the operations notice. Rather than do an individual impact analysis for each of those, it may make sense to group those together and to do a comprehensive impact analysis. Again, that's something that's going to be up to your agency, the best way to group it, whether to group it, but just something that you need to think about before you actually get to work. Next, if an activity is added to a larger initiative, so if you have one of those comprehensive initiatives, and maybe in a later year you choose to add another MTW flexibility to that initiative, it's possible you'll need to repeat that impact analysis. So just keep that in mind that once it's done, if you're adding to it, you want to look and see if you've triggered any new requirements for a new impact analysis. Next, when an impact analysis is required, it's noted with an asterisk in the safe harbor section of the operations notice. So Crystal took you through some examples of those. When there's that asterisk, we know that that's an unwaivable safe harbor. So same thing goes if you see that next to an impact analysis. There's an asterisk, then it's something that you have to do. You can't request to waive it, but we hope that you won't want to waive it because, as we hope you'll find, it's a really helpful exercise to go through. So as you decide to go about your impact analysis, we also just want to keep in mind the change management principles we've been talking about throughout your onboarding process here. So a little bit of change management you can think of when you're going through the impact analysis process. we recommend that you bring in a range of people early in the process to really go over what some of the possible implications can be with your activities. Oftentimes, if you're just, one person sitting at your desk or even a single department, you might not think of all of the different aspects of the activity and how that might affect all the different factors. So, it's often good to get different perspectives, different voices and ideas at the table ahead of time that might have a different way of looking at things than maybe you do. So that can only benefit the process. Next, not just folks at your PHA, it's possible to bring other residents and advocates and industry leaders, stakeholders, community members into the process early, because again, when you're walking in different shoes, you have different ideas about what kind of impacts they're going to be. So you can get a summary of all those, and the more work you do it on the front end of an activity about how things are going to act, the better off you're going to be and the more successful your activity is going to be. This will help you anticipate things that you might not have anticipated. So change is hard to begin with, as we know. So if you are taking the time on the front end to engage people and think about the possible unforeseen impacts of your activity, that's going to help bring buy-in to the situation, to help people get more comfortable with the ideas that you're bringing to the table, and to help them know that you've really thought out what you're doing and that it's not just a flash decision, but it's something that's really been considered and looked at from a lot of different angles. So we think that this impact analysis process can really be integrated into change management, because it can help your agency, bring those folks along to look at the different elements of what you're doing as a part of your activity. So the impact analysis information can be found, you have the link here in Appendix 2 of the Operations Notice. So if you go to the next slide, we'll look at what the specific factors are. So here we have all of the factors that must be considered. So the Mtw Operations Notice, like I said, in Appendix 2, it outlines 9 factors that must be assessed and considered when developing the impact analysis. And keep in mind that when you're doing the impact analysis, you're looking at all of these before the activity has happened. So it's what you think might happen as a result of the activity. So it's all conjecture. You don't know what's going to happen, but you're thinking about possible interactions and things that might happen. So just to clarify that it's before the activity when you're thinking of the initial impact analysis. So I said there were 9 factors, and on the screen here you can see 8 factors. So that's because the 9th factor is disparate impact. So what you're going to do when you do your impact analysis, you're going to go through all of those 8 factors that are listed on the screen, and then you're going to look at disparate impact for each of those 8 factors. So disparate impact is, technically the 9th factor to consider, but it's really woven throughout the rest of those eight other factors. So it is as you can see on the slide, kind of an overlay or an umbrella to the other factors that are on there. So let's get into some things to talk about for the specific factors. So the first one we have are the agency finances. So under this factor, you're going to want to consider how staff time maybe and changes in the amount of subsidy provided affect the agency's finances. If you're having a rent reform, for instance, that's letting the resident retain a little bit of that income to improve self-sufficiency, how is that going to affect the agency's bottom line? Are you going to lose, subsidy because of that, so revenue because of that, and how will the agency manage that? So that's an example of what you might look at under agency finances. Housing cost affordability is the second factor. Here you will consider whether changes you are implementing have any effect on the residents' ability to afford their rent. So can look at whether that's going to make housing more or less affordable for them. Again, rent policy is a really good example of where you'll need to look at that. The third factor is the agency's wait lists. So here you'll want to consider how different changes your activity will provide will affect how long residents will remain on the wait list. So maybe you have a shorter term program that's going to turn over the wait list more quickly. That would be an example. Or perhaps you have something where you're going to allow for greater periods of education and training and bring folks up to speed on career training. That could result maybe in a longer subsidy period for folks. So just something that you'll want to consider under that factor. Next, the agency's termination rate of families. So there are some activities within the Mtw Operations Notice, or
And it's on the
as a part of an agency-specific or safe harbor waiver that could have an impact on families that could result in termination. You're going to want to consider that and whether there's an increase or decrease because of the activity and what the magnitude of those changes are going to be. Next, the fifth factor, public housing occupancy level and voucher utilization. So this is one where with the landlord incentives activities, we really hope that you'll see some improvement in the utilization rate. So, you know, a good example is if you had a landlord incentives activity that was going to help with take up and voucher utilization, you hope to lease more vouchers and have more landlords available, then that would be a great, that would be a good impact to provide under the utilization rate. You know, that's going to increase the utilization rate is what you would expect. The sixth factor, meeting the Mtw statutory goals or objectives of the program. So remember, those are cost effectiveness, self-sufficiency, and housing choice, increasing those three goals. So how is this activity going to positively or negatively affect those three statutory objectives? Seventh, the agency's ability to meet the 5 statutory requirements. So remember, the 5 statutory requirements are assisting 75% of very low income households, establishing a reasonable rent policy, serving substantially the same number of families as you did before entering Mtw, serving a comparable mix of families as you did prior to entering the demonstration, and maintaining those housing quality standards as approved by the Secretary. So does what you're doing, does the activity have any impact on those 5 statutory requirements in your agency's ability to meet those? And the 8th factor, the final factor here, is the rate of hardship requests and the number granted or denied as a result of the Mtw activity. So this is one where you might offer some predictions or based on data that you have of what you think might come in. And then if you're doing that impact analysis on an ongoing basis, then you might have more data. You know, it might be more of conjecture at the beginning, and then you might have more data to use going on annually as you start to receive those hardship requests. So the disparate impact, then we have an overlay on each of those. So again, you're going to want to look at disparate impact on each of those individual factors and whether or not it applies. So next slide, please. So here we have the table. So this is the when you need to conduct an impact analysis. So let's review the table here. It's not, as I said at the beginning of the presentation here, it's an impact analysis is not required for all activities. And for activities when it is required, it could be required at different intervals. So we've taken some time to break down the different situations that you might incur and the time periods at which you'll need to do an impact analysis. So you can see the top line of the chart notes Mtw waivers that don't list an impact analysis as a safe harbor. So for those activities, you're never required by HUD to do an impact analysis. So the agency may elect to do that, but you wouldn't be required to do one or submit that with your supplement. So that's, you know, X's across the board, not prior to implementation, not during, or not after. In the bottom line of the chart, you can see the opposite of that. So for these activities, there are some in the operations notice where HUD specifically requires an impact analysis prior to implementation, annually during implementation, and at the end of the activity. So that will be stated very clearly in the operations notice. And if you've taken a look at those waivers and associated activities, you'll see where that's noted specifically. So, you know, in that case, if it says all 3, then you would need to conduct the impact analysis at all 3 points, before, during, and at the closure of the activity. So for all other waivers, we have kind of something in between. So the 3 categories we have are the Mtw waiver and associated activity where an impact analysis is required as a safe harbor. So it doesn't say during the activity, but it just says an impact analysis is required. And then you have those safe harbor waivers or agency specific waivers that your specific agency may propose from time to time. So for those, you can see that you can look at the impact analysis kind of as bookends. So you have the, you know, if it's required prior to implementation, then it's also required at the closure. You know, we want to have that information before the activity. We want to have it at the end to see how what actually happens matches up to what you anticipated would happen. So if a, if an impact analysis is required at the implementation, then it's always required at the end. So, that's real clear in the Mtw Operations Notice, where an impact analysis is required as a safe harbor. For safe harbor waivers and agency-specific waivers, that's going to be in that approval letter that you receive from HUD. So when you propose one of those, HUD does its review, you'll receive a letter that says, go forth and do your agency-specific waiver, it's approved, and it will say in that letter the terms of when you have to conduct the impact analysis. So it might say that you have to do it annually. It might not. So HUD will let you know in that instance what the case will be. And if you have any questions on this, always, please talk to your field office contacts. Sometimes they might bring in the desk officer in the Mtw office. We're always there to help you through the process. If you have a question on when or if some of these things are required, definitely, bring others into the conversation. So next slide, please. So we have some things to think about as you're conducting these impact analyses that may help you on your way to getting these put together. So the first is who will be assigned to conduct the initial impact analysis. So here you want to think about, do you have a lead staff member that's going to bring in a team? Do you have a team that's going to work collaboratively on different elements of the impact analysis? But really set out that we recommend ahead of time so that the folks who are responsible for what portions know what parts they're working on, and bring, as we said before, bring in as many people as you think you can to really weigh in on these issues. Next, you can think about what kind of methods or tools that you're going to use to collect the data. So is that going to be your your computer systems that you're already using? Are you going to need to develop another Excel-based tracker or some other tracking system in order to store this data and to run this data? How will you collect the data in a way that's going to allow you to provide any ongoing requirements for an impact analysis? It's always good to think of that on the front end. Next, how will you analyze your results? So once you have all the data and you run the numbers, what are you going to do with that information once you have it? Are you going to set different thresholds maybe for when you'll start to look at things more carefully, or when you should be flagged that, if a data point goes above a certain level, then you need to bring in more analysis to the question. So you want to think about that analysis, as you're creating your overall impact analysis plan. How often will you reassess or repeat the impact analysis? So here, sometimes, HUD's going to tell you that you need to do it annually, but other times, maybe it's not required annually. Maybe the agency wants to think about it at a different interval. Or maybe if it's required annually by HUD, maybe the agency wants to look at it on a more ongoing basis so that you're not surprised when that year comes up at the results. So just think at your agency. Again, the choice is up to the agency, but think about how often you're going to be looking at this analysis. Next, what methods are you going to use to deliver your assessment results? So how are you going to share and document this impact information? As we talked about during the change management portion, it's great to use this information to bring folks along and explain what and why you're doing as a part of your Mtw program. So an important part of that is how you're presenting the information. So really think about how you're going to deliver those results in a way that makes sense to the public. Is there any other kind of verbal or written materials that are needed to explain what's happening? It's good to think about that. And then next, how will you respond to the results? So once you, as I talked about this a little bit before, but if you see, trends in data or hitting certain levels, are you going to take any action as an agency? And at what level will you do that? And similarly, what to do if you're seeing weak or even negative results. Is there a threshold at which your agency might want to consider making some changes to the activity or maybe discontinuing the activity? So that's you want to think of that ahead of time, so when you start to receive that data, you know what to do and what you're seeing with that. So next slide, please. As you guys are the third cohort of PHAs to come onto the Mtw expansion, we have a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit of experience in how agencies have been responding to the creation of these impact analyses. So MTW expansion agencies from the earlier cohorts have a little bit of lessons learned to share with you and some different questions that you might ask yourself. So we've put those things that we've heard from the other agencies up on the board for you here. So I sound like a broken record. We can't say it enough. Crystal was saying it at the beginning of the presentation. But don't feel like you need to bite off more than you can chew. These impact analyses and the looking at your MTW activities and the waivers can be an overwhelming process. So it's always good to start small, really do a thoughtful and thorough job with the activities that you're submitting, and that includes the impact analysis as a part of that. So think once, think twice, think often about what you're doing and be really intentional about what you are proposing in that first supplement. The next point here is really engage your stakeholders. Think about who you can bring into the process and how that might benefit the activity and the success of the activity down the road. So think about that ahead of time. Bring, have as wide a tent as possible. Bring in as many thoughts and voices and ideas as you can. And finally, another point is the use of the impact analysis. Is to help your agency think through these activities. So you can use it when HUD requires it, but we recommend that even if it's not required by HUD, feel free to use the framework as you're thinking through your other activities as well. It could just be a systematic way to help you guide your MTW activity development. So we hope you'll use that as a tool to look at what you're doing in your MTW program, and that it will help you. And to that end, we have, as always, a number of resources available to you. We love to give you different modalities and ways to access information. So we have some of them listed here on the PowerPoint. You have the impact analysis requirements that are, in the document itself. So as we mentioned, that's Appendix 2 of the Mtw Operations Notice. You have how to approach an MTW impact analysis interactive training that's in the online manual. So we really recommend that you take a look at that. And then there's also an impact analysis, hardship policies, and webinar. You'll have recordings and slides available to you of this information that you can access at any time. So if what I'm saying doesn't make a lot of sense now and you want to wait until you kind of start to undergo the process and then go back and review the information, all of that will be there available for you when the time comes. So with that, I will turn it over to Mary Ann for, I think, another question session here.
Thank you, Allison. A lot of really good information on impact analysis, hardship policies. Again, I'm going to just open it up to you guys to see if there's any questions. And while I do that, John, can you go back to the previous slide? Again, tons of, the reason Allison has spent so much time on this is that we've gotten a lot of questions from the first couple cohorts of Mtw agencies about impact analyses. We hear from the initial agencies how important it is. We have a ton of resource. We have a interactive training designed just for this. We have a website, webinar just for this on the HUD Exchange. So it's really important. Don't bite off more than you can chew. It's really a good process, and Allison really was able to lay it out in a good manner. Any questions for Allison on the impact analysis? I'm always a little bit curious when there's no questions, especially from this group.
I have one question. Do you think that, from your experience, do most PHAs conduct the impact analysis internally with their current staff, or do you feel most work with consultants outside of the PHA to get the impact analysis completed?
Fantastic question, Allison. Can you talk to that?
Sure, that is a great question. So we've structured everything in the Mtw Operations Notice so that you have all the information you need to conduct the analysis yourself. So you should have everything you need. And as I said, the way you do things is up to the agency. So you have control over the level of detail and analysis that you provide. With that said, often agencies find that working with consultants for things like this is an avenue to take. So it should be structured in a way that you don't have to get a consultant, but that we leave that up to the agency.
Thanks, Allison. Great question. Other questions? All right, Allison,
I'm
do you want?
wondering,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, I'm wondering how long do impact analyses tend to run?
So it'll really depend on the specific activity that you have. So, you have to go through all 8 of the factors, but sometimes you might find that 6 of the factors are not applicable. So for that, you just write a sentence that says, we've considered this factor and we don't anticipate any impacts here. So that's going to be brief. But if you have a really complicated, intricate rent reform that's going to be highly impactful on households, then that might be longer. So it really just, depends on how much the agency detail the agency elects to put into it and the nature of the activity itself. And you can look at, remember that all of the information from prior supplements and even the original 39 agencies, all that information is available on our website. So if you want to take a look at what other folks have done, you're free to do that as well.
Great.
Hey, Marianne and Allison,
and I see.
Can I just say something?
Go ahead, Jenny.
Yeah, as coming from one of the original agencies, I will say as hard and as intimidating as the impact analysis seems to be right now, it will pay you back in dividends for the conversations that you're going to have and the justifications of why you made the choices that you did. So don't be overwhelmed by it. Just take small bites, but it will be incredibly helpful to you going forward. So
Great.
I mean, it's like a trial attorney. Never ask a question you don't already know the answer to. So do your impact analysis, know the questions that are going to come up. And I think, honestly, just know, I mean, usually most people are most frustrated, have the most questions and challenging questions about things they see that are going to negatively impact them. But impact analysis are also going to show the things that are going to positively impact them. So by doing it, you can say, hey, I understand this is hard, but look at all these other things that you are going to get as a benefit to you. And that will really reveal that.
That's
so you
great.
can talk in specifics. So
that's great. And that's a great reminder. Thanks, Jenny. And I see one last question from Anna, and then we'll move on to the next section. Anna? Anna, if you're talking, you're on mute. I could see a hand from Anna Keegan.
I asked my question already. I don't know how I'm still up.
Ah, all right. Way to go. All right. So thank you. And then Allison, and then John, maybe if you could there you go. Thank you. Allison, if you want to start talking about hardship policies. And Allison, you are on mute.
Sorry about that. So thanks, Marianne. Toggling over to hardship policies. Each MTW agency must adopt a written hardship policy, and the safe harbor section of many of the MTW waivers and activities requires this hardship policy. So again, whether or not a hardship policy is needed is going to be right available to you in that safe harbor section of the MTW activity. You'll see that there. So please, take heed and look at that before you get started with your activity development. It's really important to look at those safe harbors and what all is included. So in the operations notice, you'll find the requirements on hardship policies in Appendix 2. So that's going to provide the specific requirements that are related to hardship policies. So you'll have everything you need right there in the Mtw Operations Notice. So let me just say here too that we are seeing some hardship policies that just repeat what the operations notice said. So the idea of the hardship policy is not to just copy and paste from the operations notice, but to take those requirements and really look at them and apply them to your specific activity. So the guidelines are in the operations notice, but we really want you to take those and make them make sense for your community. So that's what they're there for. Now, a clear hardship policy will help your agency to be consistent in determining when a requirement or provision of the MTW activity creates a financial or other hardship for a family. So you can see a single hardship. You can, again, similar to the impact analysis, you can use a single hardship policy, for a specific activity, or if everything's kind of grouped together as a part of a comprehensive initiative, you can take a broader look and do a hardship policy that encompasses all of those. So that is up to the agency, and it will, make sense in different ways for the different ways you structure and bring on your MTW activities. So in either case, whether it's comprehensive or it's a single hardship policy, you're going to want to think about a few things. You want to make sure it's clear and easy to understand, because when families need to know about it, they need to know how to access it. They need to understand the relief that it may or may not give them. So you want folks to really be clear about what the hardship policy is, because they're, often accessing this in times of, strife in their life where different things are happening. So you want it to be easy to understand. You want it to be, the hardship policy needs to be reviewed with residents first during intake and at every recertification. So you're affirmatively giving this information to households. It's not something that, a policy that just sits on a shelf and, nobody really knows about it. We really want you bringing the hardship policy, whatever it is, putting it in front of families and explaining it and making sure they know about it at intake and at recertification, again, before they know that they might need to access it. So then they have the information. If a situation befalls them that incorporates the hardship policy, then, that will be familiar in their mind that there might be some, relief available. And also, you want to make sure that the hardship policy outlines how the agency will immediately provide an exemption from an MTW activity at a reasonable level and duration if it's found to cause hardship. So you're going to need to be able to kind of jump in quickly with, in some cases, and provide that hardship, at when it's requested. So you want to have clear procedures in place for how your agency is going to accomplish that. And then also another thing to think about are your grievance procedures. So, you have your first level review for your hardship policy. You want to make sure that your written policy includes whatever that grievance policy is going to be. So that needs to be included in all of your documents that are going through public process and that are being presented to your residents and households. So just like your impact analysis, the hardship policy is included as an attachment to the Mtw supplement. So you don't have a PDF form or anything to navigate through. You can just write your policy as clearly as you can and then upload it as a document as a part of the Mtw supplement to the annual PHA plan. Once approved, once your annual Mtw supplement is approved, then the policy must also be included in wherever the other PHA's written policies may be. So depending on what kind of activity it is, what your agency's inventory looks like, that could be in your ACOP or your admin plan, but that all needs to be consistent information that is available publicly. So we have, again, some resources on the bottom of the slide here. Appendix 2 is where you're going to find the actual, hardship policy requirement language. And then you have another link here to the training module on the Mtw Expansion hardship policy training that's more interactive and another way that you can access that information. So next slide, please. So here we have for you, you have the information, the operations notice is pretty brief on what's required for a hardship policy, but it does, provide the situations that you're going to need to think about. So on this slide, we've provided a, suggested process for going about developing your hardship policy. So this is not something that you have to do, but it's a systematic way that will take you through the requirement that will help you identify a hardship policy that will work well for your activity. So the first step we have is develop. So this is where you're going to look at the hardship policy requirements and what constitutes a financial or other hardship. So there's different categories that are required in the operations notice. In the development phase, you want to look at those and how they are applied to your specific activity. Create the hardship policy that is going to work for your activity. The second step is to notify. So for residents and possible landlords or other stakeholders that need to be aware, you should implement a plan that covers the hardship policy at intake, recertifications, and again, if a termination should come up, you need to notify that family again. So you make sure that you're notifying at every step required in the process. Next is the review and determine spot. So each scenario is treated as a case-by-case basis. which to review and how to review the qualifications of the hardship. So you want to really review that information, assess it carefully, and document any grievance procedures or other procedures you're using if a hardship request is denied. So you want to make sure and think about that during the process. Implement is the next step. So here you would outline a course of action. Does a hardship apply or does it not apply? You make a determination and you outline the specific procedures of the hardship. So what relief is going to be granted to this family to address the situation that has been presented to the agency, and identify any barriers or protections that may require reasonable accommodation, which is an important part of that. And then the final step here is to record. Remember, as a part of your Mtw supplement submission process, you're going to need to report on the hardships received and the number of hardships granted as a part of many activities. So you want to make sure that you're recording those hardship requests, documenting what the outcomes are, and keeping that in some sort of a comprehensive way so you'll be able to report out on that information as your annual Mtw supplement submissions are ongoing. So again, just a way for you to kind of conceptualize the hardship policy process and to apply it from start to finish. So again, it might not make as much sense now, but as you start to go through the process, feel free to pull up this slide and it may be helpful to you in thinking that through. So Mary Ann, we'll pass it back over to you.
All right. Thank you, Allison. Other really good information. Again, I want to open it up for questions. And Anna, I see your hand again. Is it meant to be up this time?
It's meant to be up this time.
Excellent.
Taking it down now.
All right.
I'm wondering, a lot of our activities in our cohort, specific ones, seem to be directed at adding benefits for landlords. And I'm struggling to see how 120% rent might constitute a hardship for the tenant, or like vacancy payments. So I can see how other changes might, but I'm struggling with some of our specific cohort activities.
Great question. Allison, you want to talk to that?
Sure. Yeah. So you aren't going to have to create a hardship policy for every activity, just like you won't have to create an impact analysis for every activity. These are only for specific activities as noted in the Mtw Operations Notice. So I think for all the landlord incentives activities that are on the top of my mind, it's not a requirement. So you're going to want to look in the Operations Notice when you're proposing an activity and look at those safe harbors. And if there's not a safe harbor that says you need an impact analysis and or a hardship policy, then it's not required that you do one. So in a lot of those cases that you mentioned, there would be no hardship policy required.
John, can you go to slide 11? So this is Appendix 1 of the Mtw Operations Notice, which you should all have printed out, tabbed, highlighted, shared. So, and again, going through what Crystal talked about before, this is where you will find whether or not an impact analysis or hardship policy is required as a safe harbor. If it has an asterisk, you can't waive it, you got to do it. If it doesn't have an asterisk, you have to do it unless you can seek approval through a safe harbor waiver, requesting not to do it for some reason. But the operations notice for every single waiver and associated activity will spell out what the activity is and what those safe harbors are, and then that's where you'll find out whether or not you have to do one. And then that other slide that Allison spoke to, referring to Appendix 2 of the Operations Notice. And if we go to slide 17, John, or Gwendolyn, or Andolyn, this is an easy snapshot of knowing whether or not it's required or not. And also the Operations Notice will tell you. Great question. Thanks. Other questions on hardship policy? Okay, let's go to slide 25. Oof. We are now going into a break. It's going to be a 9-minute break. It is now 3:21 Eastern. Let's just take 9 minutes, grab some water, step away from your computer, let the impact analysis and the hardship policy information just kind of absorb into your brain. And we will see you back here at 3:30 Eastern. Thanks, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your break, your water, your whatever else that you did. We are approaching the home stretch. As a reminder, please submit any questions into the chat box, or we'll also have, of course, more time for questions, verbal questions as well. Think of your questions, keep them coming. There's some really good ones. All right, Jenny Rainwater, are you there? Hello, Jenny.
Hey, Marianne.
Hello, Jenny. And when I say Jenny Rainwater, everybody, we are going to Hollywood. Jenny and I are about to put on a Hollywood show that is worthy of the Grammys or Oscars or Golden Globes or whatever it might be. Jenny is the executive director of the XYZ Housing Authority in somewhere that has funny green leaves in the background. And she has recently been designated. I'm going to be playing the role of her HUD field representative that she works with on all things Mtw Supplement related, and we are having a quick phone call. So we're gonna just dive right in. We are going to Hollywood, and get ready with those trophies. Hello, Ms. Rainwater. How are you this afternoon? Congratulations on your designation. How are you feeling?
Hey, I'm feeling good. This is awesome. Our staff is really excited. They got all excited when we submitted our application, and when we heard we had been selected, they have been on thinking overdrive on top of everything else. So they've been coming up with all kinds of ideas and ways they think they should be doing the programs. Hard to keep up with them now.
It sounds like you've had great conversations with your staff, which is so important. They're a good place to start. They've got ideas. What about your residents and other stakeholders? Have you had any conversations with them?
We actually have. It's, as hard as this time has been for everyone in dealing with COVID, it has produced an environment that we are having lots of conversations just in general. So it's been a great platform or environment to say, hey, we have the opportunity to do some new things. From your perspective, how can we do it better? And they were very free with their thoughts and their ideas on how we could be doing it better. So
free is good.
Exactly.
That sounds great. Sounds like you've had some good conversations.
It has been good. Go ahead. Keep going.
Where do you want to start? What are you going to do?
That is the question, is where do we start? Because some of the ideas are so high-minded. It feels like it would be too big a bite to take on at the beginning. And so some of that has been, okay, we can keep that as a high goal, but let's see where we could start today. I mean, what would make a difference today? And so, that same conversation we also took to our community partners, program people that we work with, also the advocates that, unfortunately, we often sit at opposite sides of the table because someone has tripped up in some way. And so just saying to them, hey, what's working or what's not working, and hearing what why are people going to them? Is there something that we could be doing better? And they were also free.
Did you come up with an idea, like which activity you might want to do?
I think we're actually going to start with the alternative re-examination schedule. Let's just see how we can just relieve some of the overwhelm that everybody is feeling today. And
that's a great start.
I don't think that is anything that, or I don't think that's anything that people are going to complain about. It's kind of like, if I don't have to go to the DMV ever again, I'm really happy. And if I don't have to go to the housing authority, Go ahead.
Would it be applying to everybody, to just elderly, disabled, new, current households, new households?
We're actually looking at applying it to everyone. So
Okay.
both, families that we would consider work able or those that are elderly or disabled or some combination. I think it would just be cleaner
Great.
and easier for everyone to understand if we applied it to everyone. So that's
Great.
what
And
we're
have
looking at.
you thought about like an impact analysis? Would it cost anything to your agency?
We have looked at that. We need to go back and do it in a more diligent fashion, but I
Yeah.
don't think it will have a huge cost to us. I think there will be some savings, especially, the way the staff have seen it is, oh, good, my work's getting cut in half. It's like,
Yeah.
no, wait a minute. But it does provide some relief and the
Yeah.
opportunity to refocus and say, okay, if I'm cutting your work in half, does that mean I'm going to give
Yeah.
you half of your salary?
Yeah.
It's like, no, let's
Yeah.
reallocate what you do every day and let's see how we could help more. So are there other supports that we can provide? How can we help the
Yeah.
self-sufficiency of the families?
Yeah.
So we've been looking to see what that would mean. But obviously we need to start first, see where we're
Yeah.
at, and then reassess. So yeah, that's a really important thing.
Ms. Rainwater, it sounds like you are off to an incredible start. Congratulations. Welcome to the MTW fold, and I look
Thank you.
forward to continuing to work with you on that. So thank
Same.
you.
Thank you. Thank you for all your help.
Awesome. All right. So are we getting a Golden Globe or anything, guys? I don't know.
Academy
So
Award.
that's just an Academy Award. That's just an example of what a conversation, how you might be thinking through the activities, the people you might be talking through. And quite frankly, we just really walked through a supplement, right? So we'll talk more about the supplement next time, but we walked through a lot of the questions that are there. So thank you, Jenny, Madam Executive Director of XYZ Housing Authority. And Crystal, I'd like to toss it over to you if you want to talk a little bit further about the public process.
All right. Yes, thank you. And special thanks to Marion and Jenny for letting us listen in on that insightful conversation. But one of the things that I found like most enlightening is that you express the importance of early engagement with your staff, your residents, your community stakeholders, and understanding that each aspect of this, through and through, everything is connected. Mtw waivers, associated activities, and then there's another aspect of this with the public engagement, and that's the understanding that we know that getting residents to engage can be challenging. Be thinking about what this looks like for your agencies. Who will be in charge of posting the agency's minimum 45-day public review period? Who will be in charge of promoting attendance for the public hearing? Will your agency's public hearing be held face-to-face with an option to join online to reach more individuals? Public engagement, when it's done right, it's a real process. Just as you see in the graphic here, trust, education, inclusivity, and preparation, all is very important. And you can establish trust by being transparent, follow through on what you say and what you'll do. You will hit a road, bump in the road, you will, and be honest about it. Share what you did to address it. Educate your stakeholders. Continue to get involved with your residents, your staff, your board, local government, partner agencies, and HUD field offices. And come prepared with context and to answer questions. Listen to suggestions, and again, use that draft working copy of the Mtw Supplement as a communication tool. And then finally, I would say be inclusive. Welcome all voices. Super important to remove any physical barriers, as you all know. Remove cultural and language barriers. Anything logistically that would potentially hinder participation, such as work hours or childcare and transportation challenges, all should be kept in mind when engaging your public and gaining feedback. And also the online training manual, want to do that plug again, is a great resource and helpful information about engaging with your staff and gives you a lot of good ideas. So next slide, please. All right. So charting the course. I will pass it back to Marianne.
Thanks, Crystal. And I get the fun part of just like kind of bringing it all together. You've got some really great information today from Crystal and Allison and Jenny. So here we just wanted to kind of wrap it up and then open it up for questions. Key takeaways: charting the course, identify your desired effect. What do you want to do? What is that challenge that you've been trying to get to that HUD regulations won't let you get to? Maybe Mtw will help. I try to identify through those 8 or 9 factors. We'll analyze the impact that it will have. Will the activity, think through it, will it have the desired effect? Are there any unintended consequences? Is any waiver authority needed to do it, right? So do you need Mtw, or maybe you're just thinking differently and you're just trying to do something in a new way that may or may not even need Mtw. And then once you've kind of thought that all through, engaged with your communities, kind of figured out what you want to do, that's when you kind of sit down and start kind of filling out that supplement and uploading it into the system, which we'll talk a lot more about on May 4th. Couple tips and tricks that the team has put together based on what we've seen from the initial slew of expansion agencies. Maybe your activity doesn't require an Mtw waiver. That's okay. Then you can just describe what you're planning on doing. Maybe it describes multiple waivers, right? You can pull them together and create an initiative with like 3 or 4 different activities and waivers together, right? So what is it that makes the most sense to help your agency do what you think you need to do? Don't be limited by the Mtw Operations Notice, right? Think big. What is that challenge you're trying to solve? Maybe it's already included in the Appendix 1. Maybe it's not, and maybe you need to submit an agency-specific waiver. And work with you, right? Your field office, your headquarters support will work with you on that as well. If you want to go through the ops notice and just kind of pick a few waivers, that's great, but I wouldn't necessarily limit yourself to that. As Jenny, as Madam Executive Secretary of XYZ Agency described, as well as Maria Rosso of San Bernardino and others, maybe start with the low-hanging fruit. You don't have to do everything in year 1, right? You got to do something around landlord incentives, right? You got 2 activities on landlord incentives that you have to do. That's the only requirement. Other than that, take the time. You don't have to think about everything you might want to do with Mtw. You're Mtw for 20 years. Take your time, figure out how and where you want to start. Maybe you want to start with some of the low-hanging fruit. As you start realizing some of those administrative savings, then you can turn that funding over to the self-sufficiency. As a runner, it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? We're not out to get like the 10-second 100-meter dash. We're out to like plan it out long-term, 20 years. So kind of think of it in that way. And again, you don't need to pick everything right at once, right? You can pick a couple of waivers in year 1, another waiver in year 3, add a couple more in year 4, maybe stop doing a waiver that you had started. You don't have to figure it all out before you submit your first supplement. Just you got to figure out for that supplement what you want to implement that year. We're here with you, right? Your field office is standing at the ready. Your other Mtw agencies are at the ready. We're here at the Mtw office. I say it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't, think big, be creative, kind of go in there and address those challenges. And so with that, we've got about 10, 15 minutes left to just answer any questions that you have. If we could just go to that next slide, please, John. Any questions at all of what we've talked about today or anything at all? We are here to answer any questions. And as a reminder, you can put your question in the chat box, or you can raise your hand or just unmute yourself. Don't be shy. All right, I'm gonna ask you a question. John, can you put up the knowledge check number 1, please? You asked for it. All right, true or false? Because Mtw waivers are included in the Mtw Operations Notice, Mtw agencies may begin implementing them as soon as HUD executes the Mtw ACC amendment. True or false? Because Mtw waivers are included in the Mtw Operations Notice, Mtw agencies may begin implementing them as soon as HUD executes the Mtw ACC amendment. True or false? All right, John, what was the result? Oh my goodness, way to go, team. You got it right. Yes. The answer to that question is false. You cannot begin to implement any of those waivers until what? Anybody shout out? When can you start implementing a waiver or activity?
When your supplement's been approved.
Yes, good job. Way to go. Thanks, Jenny. Though what you can do as soon as that ACC amendment has been executed by HUD is use your funding flexibly, which Philip talked about in previous webinars. So you can use your funds flexibly once the ACC amendment's approved, but you cannot implement those waivers until that supplement is approved. Way to go. Any other questions? Gonna pop quiz it again. All right, John, can we do number 3? I don't even remember what that question was, but can we do number 3? How should the hardship policy be shared? A, in the materials provided to residents at intake. B, at re-exams. C, in the ACOP or admin plan. How should the hardship policy be shared? A, to the materials provided to residents at intake. B, at re-exams. Or C, in the ACAP or admin plan. All right. And the answer is all of the above. I think that's right. What, Crystal, right? That's right. ACAP admin plan. You're quizzing me too. I knew it was A and B. I was a little bit confused by C. Sorry, guys. Now you can tell where the real brains are here. So correct. I think everybody got that right except for possibly me. So sorry. Good job, everybody. Any other questions, comments, information that you want us to kind of send out in a future insider? We already committed to one topic around timing. Anything else?
I have one question.
Yes, please.
So you said that we can use the funding flexibility at the signing of the ACC, but we can't implement any of the waivers until we go through the Mtw supplement and approval. How can we use those funds flexibly without doing different? I mean, so we're changing funds. It's not in our annual plan. It's nowhere else. How do we get authority to do that?
Yep. So, and I should say it's actually you have the funding flexibility beginning the month after your ACC is signed. So if it's signed today on April 13th, beginning May 1st, you can use your funds flexibly. And so that means you can use your funds for any eligible purpose that is eligible under public housing or voucher rules but you can't implement any of them Mtw waivers that are in the Appendix 1.
Okay,
so
we could take admin fund from the Section 8 program and use it in our public housing program?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. You just can't use any of the waivers in the public housing program when you do that. You can just use it for an already eligible purpose. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does.
There's a lot more information on that in the finance webinars that we did the first couple of times, which are available on HUD Exchange as well, about like funding flexibility and reporting and all of that for when you do want to do that. But yeah, you've got that ability to use the funding flexibility now, right? Beginning that first month after it's executed, you just can't use any of the waivers until the supplement's signed. Great question. Thanks, Tom. Rachel, quick question. We've identified waivers in our approved application. It sounds like that is a good place to start with the public process, but that we are not 100% beholden to those if through the public process we're crossing something off the list and wish to add new activities. Is that accurate? The short answer is yes, that is accurate. You are not beholden to any of the activities that you identified in the application. Allison, do you want to speak to that? Allison, are you still there?
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. I don't have anything to add.
Okay, perfect. Yes. And in this cohort, the one thing that you all are required to do is 2 landlord incentives activities. But it does, I don't think, and Allison, correct me if I'm wrong, it has to be the same 2 that you put in your application, as long as you implement 2 landlord incentives waivers. Allison, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So with any of the application things, we know that it's plans. You're not stuck with that. So yep, you just have to implement 2, at least 2.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks, Allison. Great question, Rachel. Any other questions? On this or anything else? Hey, Jenny, pop quiz. Do you know how many Mtw ACC amendments have been executed so far?
Absolutely. We have 15 that have been fully executed, and we have 2 more in process right now.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
So over half of you have submitted your ACC amendments, and you know, if you get them in time for HUD to execute them by April 30th, 31, however many days are in April, you'll be able to start using that funding flexibly and beginning in May. Thanks, Jenny. Anything else? Any other questions? All right. Okay, John, next slide, please. Great. So again, we put this up here every time because we have so much information that we've been providing, so many good resources. The selection notice, you need to know, the ops notice, you need to know it well. We've got a lot of really good information on our Mtw page on how to work. There's an expansion page specifically dedicated to expansion agencies on how to work. We have a lot of information on the HUD Exchange around trainings and the webinars, and the online manual is also available on HUD Exchange, which really breaks the operations notice up into bite-sized pieces and really kind of puts it into English layman terms, some quizzes throughout, videos throughout. The supplement webpage, I want to really kind of highlight that, and Allison referred to that as well. Wendell and Huvendick on our team has spent a lot of time making sure that all of the information that we need relating to the Mtw supplement to the PHA plan is housed in one place. And there's a ton of really good resources and information in that Mtw supplement page. And so I would really just, bookmark that page as well, just to lots of good resources there. We've done trainings that are all on the HUD Exchange on both the hardship policy as well as how to approach an impact analysis. So tons of good information, tons of good resources that we've put together over the past year or so. We're updating it constantly with what we learned from you and your other fellow expansion agencies. Next slide. then upcoming webinars. So we talked a bit about the May 4th. Today was the what is the Mtw supplement. May 4th is the how, right? How do we do this? What are some tips for success? There's going to be some really good information shared in that webinar. So that'll be on May 4th. On May 25th, we will be talking about the Mtw Expansion 5.8 form, which is unique to the Mtw Expansion agencies, and we'll really be talking about what's new in that form compared to the regular 5.8 that you guys have been submitting for so many years. We've made some modifications to it to account for your Mtw flexibilities, and so we'll be talking about those changes on that May 25th date. And then finally, we'll have office hours on June 8th. This will be for all expansion agencies, your Cohort 1 and Cohort 2 agencies as well. So that will be coming. And next slide. I think that's it. Yay, thank you. So let us know, was this helpful? Is there something else that you guys want us to talk about? Let us know if there's anything that we could be doing differently to make these helpful and useful for you guys. Let us know, but we really appreciate you taking your time this afternoon. A lot of really good information was shared. Great questions as always from you guys. So thanks so much for everything. Let us know if you have any questions. So thanks everybody, and have a wonderful afternoon, everybody.